Good evening, and welcome to the Reagan Library. My name is David Trulio, and it's my privilege to be the president and CEO of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. So we begin all of our official programming here at the Reagan Library with a Pledge of Allegiance, so I'm going to ask that all of you please stand and join me in saluting our flag and all those who serve under it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go any further, I would like to recognize one of our event participants tonight, and that is one of our newest trustees here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, John Mumtazi. Individual liberty and economic opportunity are among the core values of President Reagan and the foundation that bears his name. Today, we are fortunate to have with us a leader who shares and practices these values. In fact, he received the highest score on the 2020 Cato Institute Fiscal Policy Report Card on America's governors. That's something to clap about. In a state that requires its governors to face its voters every 2 years, our special guest is serving his 4th term. Immensely popular, he won big in 2022, and in 2020, he received more votes than any candidate in state history. Amazing. In this election cycle, it should come as no surprise that as presidential candidates flocked to New Hampshire, well in advance of its first in the nation presidential primary, they wanted to be seen with our guest, and of course, they wanted to receive his endorsement. The Washington Post even dubbed him the most wanted man in New Hampshire. Given his stature and his accomplishments, people would sometimes ask whether this governor might run for another office or two. Now, when it came to the U.S. Senate, he said in 2021, quote, "I'd rather push myself 120 miles an hour delivering wins for New Hampshire than to slow down, end up on Capitol Hill debating partisan politics without results." And there is no doubt that our guest has been pushing himself 120 miles an hour. Now, in his final year in office, he has a record that would make any governor envious. He's delivered balanced budgets with no new taxes. But not only that, he's phased out the interest and dividends tax for retirees and reduced property taxes while still investing more in schools per pupil than ever before. And today, the Granite State is a leader when it comes to growth in the Northeast, a leader when it comes to helping child poverty stay low, and the state has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation. Sounds like they have it figured out in New Hampshire. Governor, maybe when all this is over, you might take a sabbatical and teach us a thing or two here in California? Maybe an extended tutorial? Okay. So what is it in our guest's background that helped make him a success? Well, before he entered public service, he graduated from MIT with a degree in civil and environmental engineering, and he worked as an environmental engineer. Arguably, he had the perfect training for success in fixing government. He literally spent 10 years, get this, cleaning up hazardous waste sites across the country. Ronald Reagan built a career outside of politics. He captured the attention of those within his state and beyond. He was a popular governor, and he generated results as a happy warrior. Tonight, we are fortunate to follow in that tradition, so I ask you to please join me in welcoming to the stage the 82nd Governor of New Hampshire, the live free or die state, Governor Chris Sununu.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I got to bring you everywhere. That was great. Where do you want me? Okay, that's great. Holy cow. Please.
Well, we have, so I had an opportunity to speak to the governor briefly before we got started, and I asked him if he had met President Reagan, and of course, no surprise, he had. So we actually have a photo that would be fun. Well, not of you and President Reagan,
okay.
but a family connection to President Reagan. So let's see if we can bring that photo up. There you go. So that is President Reagan with Governor John Sununu, the governor's dad, and President.
He looks like Bush's kid. Look how short he is.
Yeah. So,
that's great.
Fun. So
That's
tell us,
great.
when did you meet President Reagan, or how did you come to
So I was about 84 was actually the first time I met him. I was born in 74. I'm 49. The first question I always ask the fourth graders when they tour the school is how old they think I am. That gets some laughs. But anyway, in 84, I was 10 years old, and Reagan came. So in 1980, obviously a big race when he was going against Bush, the famous "I paid for this, Reagan, I paid for this microphone, sir," line. I was only 6 years old at the time. He really didn't have to work too hard to win New Hampshire in 84. Turns out he didn't have to work very hard anywhere, apparently, after he cleaned up with Mondale. But no, I met him once when he had come there, and I met him right before he left office in 88. At the time in 88, my father was really just 24/7 trying to get the vice president elected president. And so, they kind of had their past. And I had, to be honest, I grew up, my parents had two rules. You have to give back. That was what it was. You didn't have to run for office, but you got to give back. And I tell people this all the time. You got to have your thing, right? Be a nurse, be a teacher, volunteer at the food bank, run for office. Do something to better your community, right? You got to give back in some way, but don't necessarily make a career out of it. If you can, that's great, but politics especially, no careers in politics. He taught us that. And people say a lot, well, all you Sununus went into politics. My brother was a congressman and a U.S. senator. My father was governor of the White House, chief of staff. And there's me. Yeah, there's 10 of us in the family. 3 out of 10 of us got elected to public office. In New Hampshire, that's like below average. That is literally below average, because everyone gets elected to something in New Hampshire. But that's more of the, believe it or not, that was the culture. We were a political family, for obvious reasons, but that's not that different. New Hampshire is a very political state. It's a very give-back-ish type state.
But it's also worth noting, 3 of you, at least that I know of, went to MIT, right? So you don't just
4 of us, yeah.
4 of you.
Yeah.
So you don't just.
But I still got the most votes of anyone. Let's just focus on, when you bring that stat, you brought that stat up, I haven't heard that in a long time. I did get the most votes of anyone, and I could really care less, but believe you me, I called my father right away. I said, guess what? Your record's busted here, buddy. So, but yeah, 4 of us went to MIT, all had kind of different careers. There were 10 in the family. We all led very, very different careers. I lived in San Francisco for 3 years cleaning up. My thing was cleaning up chlorinated solvents in contaminated groundwater. And I did a lot on the West Coast. I did a lot in Utah, Sacramento, things like that. It was fun. I was an engineer, but I got to be outside.
So before we leave the formative part of your life, we're the same age. So you're roughly 6 years old when President Reagan gets elected. You're 14 when he leaves office.
Yeah.
What was it like having him be the model of a president as you were growing up, especially in a political family, political state? But what was it?
He was the first, right? I remember when Carter, a little bit, my dad would be watching. I remember my dad was always grumpy when 60 Minutes was on in the 70s, and I didn't know why till later. It was always because they were talking about Jimmy Carter, and he'd get frustrated. So I just remember as a kid, I think as a lot of us did, first off, Reagan was strong, and he had style. He was very likable. And if there's anything I took away, my father, I believe, just to stick on the family thing, my father, I think, tried to emulate that a lot when he was governor. My dad was an engineer. He was the dean of engineering at Tufts University and then became governor. And he's a nerd. He's a really smart nerd. But boy, when he became governor, I don't want to say it was a new side to him, but we all as kids saw something different. He was very funny. He was very endearing. He spent a lot of time outside the office. He knew he did his homework. He always did his homework. But he spent a lot of time. And so that was emulating Reagan. And so when I looked to enter politics, or really when I started running my own company, that's just a leadership value. It's not just political, right? You want to be transparent. You want to be connected to your employees. You want to be connected to your customer. You want to be connected to whatever's out there. And my father, he doesn't give me a lot of advice, although it's getting to be more and more often. I guess he's getting older and grumpier, but it's good. As you get, if he's 85, he's still very grumpy, which is good. As soon as he's not complaining, I'll worry, right? He's still very much engaged. But he always said, the most important thing you give is your time. And he said, no one in the State House has any answers. Don't fool yourself. They don't have any answers. You don't have the answers. The only way you can figure out what's wrong and what the opportunities are to go outside of the State House. Then you bring that back in and try to turn it into something real. So that was the one thing he taught me. And I went, oh, now I get it. Like thinking back when I was a kid, he was doing what Reagan was doing, which was giving of your time, being as familiar, friendly, whatever you want to call it, because even the most staunch Democrat has a hard time yelling at you when you're asking, hey, how are your kids? You know, that just deflates them right there, right? They got to scream at you about some policy you did after you just, asked about the kids and the wife and the whole 9 yards and visited the school or did a proclamation for them. So he was very good about building relationship building, which I just think is a leadership quality that is very much successful in the private sector, but specifically in Washington, it's a disaster.
Well, I do want to get into that more, but before we move on, is there anything about being an engineer or your skill set as an engineer that's helped with
I think only engineers should get to be elected office. I got to be honest. I got to be really blunt, and I'm sorry if you take offense, but I don't think lawyers should be allowed to run for office. I don't. They have
what
their
about
place.
recovered lawyers?
Recovered lawyers, fine.
Who renounce
if you've truly recovered. But look, engineering is all about. It's all about learning how to rebuild a system design, identifying a problem. And one thing you learn at a place like MIT, we learned you never design the system right the first time. There's always imperfections. So always design your system with flexibility. Washington doesn't do that. Washington passes a law and they think they got it right. And even when they know they got it wrong, they don't have the guts to go back and fix it. But as an engineer, and especially as a governor, as an executive, where you really can tinker with systems, right? And that's getting into the fundamental difference between a governor and Congress and Senate. Governors are 24/7. I mean, I'm obviously very partial to governors, but there's a couple things you have to understand. Governors are 24/7, completely accountable. They're the designers of the system. If you look at Congress and the Senate, let's talk about what they do for a second, and why I'm so negative on Washington. They vote for a policy. I'm for or against that policy, and then I'm for or against the funding. And that's it. That's literally all they do. The system design. No one in Washington can tell you how their mental health systems work back in their own states. They can't tell you how their opioid treatment systems actually work. Where are the doorways? Where's the opportunities? What's the phone number you pick up? What's the access point for kids in mental health? What are the access points for someone to get better services? All that design happens at the state level. Now, that's one of the reasons why governors as a whole, Republican and Democrat alike, we all get along very, very well. I mean, we really do. A case in point, someone asked me recently, so I'm going to jump the question a little bit. Phil Murphy. Phil Murphy's the governor of New Jersey. You couldn't find two people more politically opposite than me and Phil, but I'd have a beer with that guy, 4 days a week. He's a nice guy. He's very funny. He's very endearing. And he has no problem saying, hey, how did you do this? And how did you do that? Especially during the pandemic. All the governors would get on the phone pretty much every night. If you notice, Congress disappeared, right? It was the 50 governors. Thanks to Mike Pence. This was Pence's idea, by the way.
A former governor himself.
A former governor himself. One of the greatest, Pence deserves a lot of credit for a lot of things, but one of the great things he'll never get enough credit for is forcing that administration to lean on governors and believe in that 10th Amendment, right? That that laboratory of democracy really happens at the state level. And governors, for the most part, stepped up. Some made bad decisions, some made good decisions. I made the good ones, of course. But we did, as governors, really have to step up. So we were constantly on the phone.
Were they all on the phone? I mean, did all, 45 out of 50 of them?
So early on, what would happen in the pandemic is all 50 governors would get on a call every night. Eventually, that turned into, we said, well, we need the president on the phone with us. And to his credit, for all the tough issues I have with former President Trump, him and Pence would get on the phone every day with all of us. Fauci and the whole gang, and obviously the whole Fauci experiment didn't work out well. We can talk about that. But so the nighttime calls turned to the daytime, and what replaced the nighttime calls is I would really do the Republican governors at night, because it started to get clear that the blue states were going one way and the red states were going another. And so we just would talk about our policies, how we were mostly how we were keeping things open. We were a very open state in New Hampshire. Had guidelines, had rules and regulations, but it really worked. And especially in the Northeast. Northeast is very blue. So everything shut down in the Northeast, except us. And our economy soared because of it. And yet we still had the lowest death rate in the country. So we 10th lowest death rate overall. But so we were able to kind of find a balance. But that, again, I'd call Doug Ducey in Arizona. Doug, I hear you're doing this. How'd that work? Hogan in Maryland. Larry, I hear you're getting tests out of South Korea. How are you doing it? I was the PPE guy. I had a great deal in pulling masks out of China that nobody else could get. At one point, New Hampshire was supplying virtually all the masks and gowns and gloves to the VA across the country. I know you don't want to talk about this, but this was a fascinating thing. The secretary, it really was. The secretary of the VA called me right in the middle of the pandemic and said, "We hear you're bringing in two or three planes a week full of gloves and gowns and masks." I said, "Yeah, I found a way to do it." And he said, "I got a problem. As a secretary of the VA, he did not have the ability to cut a deal with the Chinese, who at the time were giving us the masks. Only states could do that." I said, "This is the dumbest thing I ever heard." He said, "I know, but can I buy your masks?" So
Did you mark it up?
2%, literally 2%. Shipping and handling. Better than Amazon Prime. So we started doubling. We started bringing about 4 or 5 flights a week. They'd land in Manchester. They'd go from Beijing to Anchorage to Manchester, New Hampshire. National Guard would unload the plane. About 60 or 70% of it, because we got our fair share, obviously, would get on trucks and literally at one point, would be shipped to like Burbank, California. The VA's everywhere. But it was a great example of, oh my God, the federal government cannot get out of their own way. It was a real shame. I was happy to help, and all the governors stepped up in new and unique ways that way. But it was really driven by Pence more than anything. And it was a great example of, we all came together. And we all liked each other, with one exception. Cuomo. There are children in the room, so I'm going to be careful about what I say. But Governor Cuomo, I'll just say nobody liked that guy. Nobody liked that guy at all. He was such a difficult and pompous individual. And, I was going to say we're back to normal. There's now one other governor that none of us can stand. Even the Democrats can't stand him.
Wow.
He lives about a couple hundred miles north of here.
Okay, got it.
No one likes that guy. Sorry, Gavin.
Were there any surprises, or did any other, to the extent you're comfortable saying, did any other governors really surprise you as this person's really innovative, or I never would have expected this from this state, or something like that?
Give me 30 seconds here. Pritzker tried in Illinois. He was a real fish out of water. I think he had politics that were pushing back on him that he just couldn't overcome. But I had a lot of conversations with Pritzker where he really wanted to do things differently and better, I think. DeSantis did things okay, but he was following the politics in a very weird way. And, he was kind of taking a little bit of credit for a lot of the things that we're all doing. But it was a team effort. It really was. On the Democrat side, give me 30 seconds. There weren't a ton of Democrat governors at the time, so it was kind of nice. We didn't have to worry about some of those guys. I dealt a lot with all the Democrat governors in New England. New England's so different because we're 6 states. I have 80,000 people a day working across the border. So when Massachusetts did something or Vermont did something, it affected all of us because our communities, our families, our businesses. In Oklahoma, if Texas does something, okay. But in New England, it was like a tube of toothpaste. If one state did something, everything came out the other end in a mess. So we had to really be tight together. It didn't always work out. I begged them not to do certain things, but they, again, kind of felt some political winds. The longer it went on, the more the blue state governors, I think, fell to politics in the wrong way, unfortunately.
It's inevitable that there'll be some other pandemic in the next,
coming,
how many years it is. But do you look to the future with concern, or that we actually learn some lessons?
Well, no, I don't look to it with concern because I think we did learn lessons. I think a lot of us did after actions. We have a whole book on what happened day by day, where the good decisions were, where, hindsight's 20/20, we wish we had done things differently, how we coordinated, all of that sort of thing. The key to everything was the federal government allowing states to have flexibility to find their own path. That was the key. If Washington tried a one-size-fits-all a crisis, it doesn't work. So that would be the only thing I would hope whoever's in office, if and when a tragedy like that comes again, they learn from the fact that, you got to let states innovate. You got to let states figure out how to get the vaccines out, how to move things quickly. At the end of the day, the federal government was okay, but, FEMA, I don't know a better way to say it. I was so disappointed in FEMA. They made a lot of promises that never came true. They told us a lot of things that gave us false hope. And governors quickly had to learn, okay, don't even listen to anything that those guys are saying. It's all nonsense. We're on our own, right? No, we're going to send you gowns. They would literally send us gowns where their arms were sewed together. You couldn't put your hands in the gown. It was junk that had been stored there since 1997. gloves, nitrile gloves, no one uses nitrile gloves anymore, that would disintegrate when you put them on. I mean, literally. So we realized, oh my God, like there's no help coming. There's no help coming from the feds. So we were kind of on our own. So hopefully they would just learn from that on the federal level, but hopefully that allow states to innovate their own solutions. I know we weren't here to talk about the pandemic, but we all have our own story with it though, right?
No,
terrible,
absolutely.
terrible.
I mean, it was a huge issue, especially here in California. But switching gears a little bit, you're known for fiscal responsibility. You have a prosperous economy. You have not raised taxes.
I'm not familiar with that term.
The country is $34.5 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
So what do you, as a successful governor, what do you propose that the nation do to address this?
So
it's a crisis.
It is, and this is like my downer moment because I don't have a great answer for this. We have no sales tax. I have no income tax. I just got rid of the interest and dividends tax. We have no estate tax. We have none of that, right? And we still have hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus. And again, I understand a lot of you are from California. I'll explain what a surplus is later. They're not some mythical thing like a leprechaun. They really do exist. They really exist.
So
there is a pot.
Let me guess. You don't have a wealth tax, do you?
No, we love, no. The wealthier you are, the less we want to tax you because you create jobs and you build the economy and you invest in your businesses and we love it. We are a very free market. I'm going to jump in. I talk too much, I know, but here's a quick story for you. They all wanted me to run for the U.S. Senate. And I very much thought about doing it. And this was in 2020. And I'm talking to all these senators, and I'm not getting great answers. Well, you know, they're like, I won't say who, but he's a senator from Texas, was like, you know, you get a lot of vacation. Do you know all the vacation you get? You have a family. Don't you want to spend time with your family? You should run for the Senate. I'm like, well, that's not why I would do this. Like, we're trying to get stuff done, not go on vacation, you know. So that was disappointing. I go out to Las Vegas to speak at the Republican Jewish Coalition, big annual meeting they have out there. And the Vice President Pence is there, I'm there, and Lindsey Graham comes over. And I've known Lindsey for a long, long time. And we always got along. Not quite trading Christmas cards anymore.
Past tense?
Very much past tense.
Okay.
So Lynn sits down, and he's like, hey, you got to run, you got to run. And I said, well, look, you're the ranking member on Senate Finance. I'm a fiscal hawk. I believe if you get your economy right, if you get this debt managed, we have an opportunity. But if you don't, we are in real trouble in this country. And he said, oh, Gov, he goes, you don't get it. People don't care about that. And I went, wait, what? What's that you're talking, what? And he said, no, let me explain it. He goes, let me explain it to you. And Pence was sitting like over us like this. And he looks at Lindsey and looks at me and goes, I think that was the wrong answer, Senator. And he walked right out because he knew my head was about to explode. And I said, what do you mean people don't care about this? And he said, well, there's no way we'd ever pass a balanced budget. You need 60 votes. I said, so what? Propose one. Make them take a vote. Make them get on record and find out where the who isn't pushing and give a little, get a lot, negotiate it out, figure it out, man. And he basically not convinced me, but argued to me that balancing a budget wasn't important. The debt wasn't that big of a deal because at the time we haven't hit these inflationary moments. He's like, you don't understand because of inflation and and it's really not that big of a deal. And I went, holy cow, this is like MMT, right? You know, modern monetary theory, which is wrong, which basically says as long as you print your own money, the debt doesn't matter. And I have the ranking Republican of the U.S. Senate telling me this. I made the decision right then and there. I'm not doing this. I am not going to go to D.C. and have my fellow Republicans try to explain to me why the debt isn't important. They think it's government debt. He kept saying that too. Well, the government debt, I said, stop. There's no such thing as government debt, everybody. It's your debt. You owe that money. The government doesn't owe anything. You do. You pay that. And every time they say government debt, that blows my mind because there's no such thing. Every single one of you owe it. All our kids owe it. All of our grandkids are going to pay this thing back and limit their opportunity. And government has one role: create opportunity. Government is not here to solve your problems. Now I'll get really ethereal for you. We're not here to solve your problems, but we are here to create as many doors of opportunity, right? For you, for your family, for your kids, for your business, whatever. And then, live free or die. You do you. You pick what door is best for you. And when you do that, it's a free market. That's how you install a free market into government. You get better outcomes, much more efficient government. One of the rankings you didn't give, which I'm very proud of, 8th year in a row, and I happen to have been governor for 8 years now. We're now ranked the most efficient government in the country, right? You get the best bang for your buck, which I'm very proud of. As an engineer, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, efficiency in government. But that's my dour note. If this ranking member of the Senate, a Republican, tells me that the debt isn't important, holy cow, is he wrong? Is it going to really plague us? And it's why I said I'm not going to go. I said you guys will frustrate me in about 6 days, and then for the next 6 years, I'll be frustrated with you, and I'm not doing that to myself. So thanks, but no thanks. You guys keep playing in your political world. I'll keep getting stuff done for New Hampshire.
But how does this play out, right? So let's extend.
Okay.
Because no matter what policy issue somebody cares about, the debt and interest on the debt will affect it. So whether you care about Medicare or Social Security or defense.
It plays out in about 8 years, because where do we hit a wall? Social Security and Medicare. They go bankrupt 8-10 years from now, right? And like all good things in Washington, they don't do anything till there's a real crisis. Well, that crisis is going to be very real. These guys can't even continue government for more than 3 months. What are they going to do when they literally run out of money in Social Security? Because by law, a lot of people don't talk about this, but by law, your benefits, if you're on Social Security now, by law, your benefits get cut 23% as soon as it goes bankrupt. That's in the law. No one has to do, if we do nothing, which we're doing, those cuts are coming. So when it goes bankrupt in about 9 years, that's what the number says about now, we're going to have a real problem because benefits will be getting cut by rule. There'll be no more money, like really no more money. And we'll have kicked the can down the road, and then, we'll see what happens. So we'll have a bad solution, right? Because if you're managing in a crisis, you can solve things, you can create a path, but man, it's really your lowest common denominator of options. So unfortunately, that's what I see coming, because I just don't see. Now here's the irony of this all, right? You know, this Trump guy, you've heard of this Trump guy, right? He has an amazing opportunity, which I don't believe he'll take advantage of, in that, or Biden, either one. Whoever gets elected is likely going to be a lame duck president, right? They can't run again. In Trump's situation, you know, a lot of the challenges you have with presidents on these issues of Social Security and Medicare is Congress and Senate are weak, and they don't care what the president says. They're afraid of the voters back home. But boy, are these Republicans scared to death of Trump, right? He could actually force them to do the right thing if he himself had the will and got elected, which is an amazing opportunity. But he doesn't understand the opportunity. He's lived by debt his whole life. He doesn't mind bankruptcy. He doesn't think debt is a problem. There's always somebody else to pay the bill. So I'm not hopeful, although it really is, if he were to get elected, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of his, he would have an amazing opportunity, because every Republican would do what he said. They're scared to death of him. Even if they don't want to, they'll follow him. They would rather face the wrath of fixing Social Security and whatever that might look like with their voters than the wrath of Trump at this point. I just don't think he has if he were to get elected, and he may, I just don't think he has the understanding or the will to do it.
Well, we're fresh off the New Hampshire primaries, or relatively so. So let's talk about that. You were obviously a very, very prominent, very, very engaged supporter of Governor Nikki Haley. Okay, so there, clearly some folks appreciate that.
So close, so close. We almost did it.
She's, President Trump will be the nominee. It's very clear. Subsequent to Nikki Haley suspending her campaign, you told WMUR in Manchester, "I'm going to support the ticket. I'm going to support Donald Trump, but my focus is definitely going to be here in the state."
Yeah.
So what led you to the decision to back President Trump, despite your many stated concerns about him?
Sure, and I'm the one stating many of the concerns. But here's the decision. First, we have a binary system. The third-party thing is not going to happen. It's not going to materialize, and we can talk about why that won't be. But here's the deal. In my mind, this is what it is. I can get a Republican administration, or I can get Kamala Harris. That's our decision here, guys. That's it. I don't. And God bless him. I saw the president 2 weeks ago. He could get Biden, could win, but if he does, I don't think anyone has any real feeling he's going to make it another 4 years by one way or the other. So Kamala Harris will be your president if Biden wins. That's it. So, and as a governor, I'll tell you, through all of Trump's antics and the fact that he'll get locked up, the Democrats won't negotiate and deal with him on anything. We all know that. So that all might get locked up. But you know where the power is in Washington anyway? It's in the agencies. It's in all the rulemaking and the policy making.
Except your VA when you can't get PPP.
Right? Well, because they wanted to follow the rules. But that's a really good example, actually. But at the end of the day, like what the EPA is doing that nobody's talking about right now, this EPA administrator is nuts and just crushing development, progress, the ability to invest capital, permitting projects and all of this. Here's one example. The EPA is about to come out with a rule to clean up, and trust me, I spent my career cleaning up chlorinated solvents out of groundwater. I believe in it more than anybody. But they're coming up with a rule that will be official pretty soon, where no technology exists to clean the water up for PFAS. It's this new thing that we found, right? PFAS is all over the country now. The number they say you have to achieve is not physically possible with any technology on the planet. That's what we're dealing with. So could I get a Republican EPA administrator that understands permitting and wants to be reasonable about things, a Republican to manage commerce? Can I get a more Republican policies internationally on tariffs? I don't like where Trump is with Putin at all, by the way, and I think that's the biggest, that and the southern border are the two biggest risks this country faces. I think democracy is being fought on the Ukraine lines right now, and I think 40 years from now, people will be under better understanding that Western democracy is at risk today, and this is the biggest fight that we've had since the Cold War. It is real, and if we don't get it right, we're going to be in trouble. So I don't appreciate where Trump is on that one. But at the same time, I'd rather have a Republican administration that governors can work with, that we can work with, that's pro-business, that actually opens markets up, that believes in actually a free market and capitalism and pushes back against all this anti-Semitism and progressive left stuff. This stuff is real, and the border, and then you add the border to it. I'll take all of that and Trump's antics versus, God knows, Kamala Harris and, Gavin Newsom and God knows what's coming after them, right?
Well, age has become a central issue in the campaign. If I recall correctly, you do not support a competency test, but should there be some kind of age restriction?
They would all fail.
Well, what about an age cutoff for people running for the presidency?
I believe voters have the final say, and some voters make really bad decisions. California, right, with what your senator went through here, horrible decision, but it's the voters' call. And if the voters can't see that you have someone that's old and either out of touch or has a physical disability or whatever, the real crisis there, by the way, you know whose fault all that is? It's the staff. It's the staff. You have all these staffs that are telling these senators or even Biden, no, stick it out. We're going to do this again. But they're doing it for themselves, knowing the risk that individual is under. Biden doesn't need to do this again, right? Mitch didn't need to stay as long as he was in a leadership position. Mitch McConnell was a great fundraiser, but my goodness. He should have been out of leadership long ago. So, but that's for the voters to
President
decide.
Biden's 81, President Trump is 77. It sounds like, is it fair to say you're concerned about that?
Absolutely. But I'm more concerned about their performance, and I would hope the voters just, keep that in mind. But I don't like doing tests. I know Nikki said that and all that. That's where she was. But who's making the test? Right? Every administration is going to change the test, and we're going to have a czar of competency tests for public officials, and where does that stop? Are we going to do it for school teachers? Come on, no. Let's just let the voters figure out who they want. And sometimes they make the right decision, sometimes they don't.
So like many conservatives, it sounds like you're taking the world as it is, maybe not as you would like it to be. So what advice do you have for Donald Trump for the next 7 months of the campaign?
So look, he doesn't need my advice. He doesn't want my advice.
He definitely doesn't want it.
No, he definitely doesn't want it. But no, he doesn't. But he does. So this is what I would tell his team. If they want to win, they have an opportunity to do a couple things. First, they need to do. Trump comes and does the big rallies. If he just mixed that in with a little bit of retail politics, walking into a diner. Not with 1,000 people. I know you need the security to do it, but they got to find a way to put him on the ground. In 2016, at least in New Hampshire, he did that. He went to manufacturing facilities, he went to the diners, he went to the coffee shops, he did gatherings in people's living rooms in New Hampshire, and it was endearing. And he lost New Hampshire by 1,000 votes. He really should have won, but if they could mix in a little retail, it would work. And he's got it, he made a really terrible mistake this week on the abortion thing, right? I don't care where you are on abortion. It doesn't matter. Don't talk about it. It's a losing issue for Republicans. It doesn't matter. The policy is, take that aside. But Republicans are the worst messengers on the issue of abortion, and this is why we lost big in 22. Not because we were wrong, but because we couldn't message it right. And the Democrats were masterful at using that to stoke fear. And he came out now proposing a 15-week abortion ban. Whatever. We can debate whether that's a good idea or not. But politically, there's no reason he should be talking about that. He's the nominee of the Republican Party. He's got that base. He's got to worry about suburban moms, and he's got to worry about young voters. That's where he's got to pick up some ground here, where we've lost ground, where we need to pick it up. The abortion issue is bad. So I don't mean to harp on that, but I'm just saying those are self-forced political errors. He can do what he wants when he gets elected, right? But if he's running if I were giving him advice, I'd say, okay, you got the nomination. Play like you're in the general election, because you're in the general election, But look, nobody, me and I think a lot of other people never thought that he'd be here right now, right? You can't criticize his strategy or lack thereof or his luck with the strategy. I mean, these lawsuits have played right into his hand. The media plays right into his hand. The media has created him. And I say this, I'm on CNN all the time. I'm on MSNBC, and I say this I can't believe these Republicans are supporting Trump. I said, what can't you understand? It's not difficult to understand why they're supporting him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's as deep as the average Republican is thinking right now. The liberal media, the liberal elitist, the liberal establishment is trying to tell my family how to live my life. My family built this country. This is what the average American is saying. My family built this country. We worked our butts off for it. We picked up arms and defended it for generations. And these liberal elitists are trying to tell me how to live my life. And who do they hate the most? Trump? Well, I guess I'm with that guy. That's literally as far as the thinking goes, guys. And that's why, as a conservative, as a fiscal conservative, as someone that's for limited government and localized government and all that, those policies, unfortunately, have temporarily gone out the window for a lot of conservative, for where we are with the presidential race right now, right? It's not about conservative values. He's not a conservative. We know that. It's not about that anymore. It will be eventually. We'll get back there, and don't worry. It's all going to be okay if you want to hear my positive outlook. But right now, it's really about, I'm tired. The average American is seeing these liberals pick on Trump. They can't stand the liberals, so I guess I'm going to stick with Trump. I wish it were deeper than that, but it's not.
So once the election happens, January 20th happens, first 100 days, what does the next president need to work on?
The border. Yeah, I mean, look, I'll tell you how bad the border is. When all the governors got together 2 weeks ago, Republican and Democrat, even the Democrat governor said, we're going to see the president. We all want to talk about the border, right? They all wanted to talk about the border.
Because of politics or because of the substance?
No, the substance. They're getting crushed. I mean, Kathy Hochul is getting crushed in New York. Gavin, he conveniently wasn't there. But, Pritzker was there. I think Pritzker was there. Kathy was there. Murphy was there. All the Democrats said, no, we got to talk about this border thing. This is real. We need something to happen. And won't bore you with all the details. It's kind of an interesting story what Biden's response was. But the border a lot can change almost instantly there. Biden signed, and I said this right to him. I said, sir, you signed 16 different policies, executive orders, and rules in his first 100 days that created this. I said, just undo that. Oh, and he said, I can't. The lawyers say I can't. And I looked at Ali, Mayorkas, Secretary Mayorkas, and I looked at him and he goes, and he got it. He knew. And this is all politics. This is all politics at this point. And then I said, this is a good one. So and to be fair, I think Biden believes what he's saying. I think the lawyers have said, we can't undo that stuff. We'll get sued. And Biden just repeats it. Yeah, we can't undo it. They say I'll get sued, so I can't undo it. But obviously he could undo it. And I said to him, how about this? How about we just start with Obama's border policies? How about we start there? Because that would be a win that we could all take. And his staff went, they didn't know what to say, because if we just started with Obama's policies, that is way better than what we got today, guys. So you have this massive lobby, the ACLU, I don't know who's driving it, but some big lobby is driving this in D.C. and scaring them politically on the left, but it's actually going to likely cost them the election, because every American sees what's happening. And if Democrat governors are scared about it, independent moms and independent voters are scared about it too, and so they're shooting themselves in the foot. I've never seen people with so much money and so much political stupidity shoot themselves in the foot all at once in Washington. It's wild.
One issue related to the border, of course, is the drug crisis. You've been outspoken about that. How is that affecting New Hampshire, the country? What are your thoughts on that?
So look, I hope I don't have to explain the severity of the crisis. When I became governor, and this is where I'm going to really pat myself on the back, but pat my state on the back more than anything. I became governor. The death rate from opioids in New Hampshire was the second highest in the country. West Virginia's 1, and we're number 2. It is the crisis that when I walk in the door. And the system, I quickly realized, was the same system we had set up to deal with alcoholism in the 70s. Right? And we had gone through so many changes, and the crisis had evolved so much, but the system had never changed. We just kept pumping money into the same nonprofits with the same 28-day programs and all that nonsense. And I said, no. I looked at the data. I found in our largest city of Manchester, where all the drug deals were happening, and that's where you were seeing the highest number of deaths. But what we found was the addiction rates in rural New Hampshire were 4 times that of the inner city. Why? Why were the addiction rates in the middle of nowhere up near Canada 4 times? No access to care. I said, there's no treatment centers. There's no recovery centers. And this young woman came up to me. I'll give you the quick short story. She said, look, Governor, I'll tough it out. I'm not going to drive 200 miles. I'll lose my job, lose my family. I'm not going to drive 200 miles down to Manchester to go to a treatment center. Thank you for your concern, but I'll tough it out. And man, that ate at me. So I blew up the whole system. I blew it all up, and we started again. We created what we call a hub and spoke system. Hospitals, when you overdosed and you went to a hospital, they pump you they bring you back with Narcan, they give you an IV. By 3 a.m., you're kind of okay sometimes, and you're walking out the door of the emergency room. And they might give you a little card and say, look, here's a local recovery center you should call. I said, no way, that cannot be the response from a hospital. So I attached these doorways to the hospitals in 9 locations. And I sat up one night on Google Maps. And I sat there and I put pins in Google Maps, and I figured the average person would consider driving about 45 minutes from their home. So I created, how few hubs can I create so everyone in New Hampshire only has to drive 45 minutes? I got it down to about 9. And then I attached them to hospitals, and then we did wraparound services. So even if you're in the middle of nowhere, not nowhere, but in rural New Hampshire, you have access to, I created something called recovery-friendly workplaces. So employers that don't mind if you're in recovery will make sure you have a job and a self-worth. We wrapped around housing programs. We wrapped around the mental health services if and when needed. We made sure we had separate programs just for kids. And by doing those full wraparounds, it costs a little more money up front, no doubt. And what I would do is I'd go to the nonprofits that used to get the big checks, or the Easter seals or whatever it was, and say, look, guys, you're doing great in Manchester. You're going to get this money, but I need you to open 3 centers in rural New Hampshire. And you're not getting a grant unless you commit that you will. Oh, okay. So they did. So we kind of incentivized them to have a broader reach. Since then, since 2017, the number of opioid deaths in America has skyrocketed 67.5% as of a week ago. I keep track of that number. Up. We're down. Wow. Now, I'm going to look, 400 people will probably, I think when I took office, about 480. And this year, we'll probably lose about 400 people. But it's less than 480, like we're at least bucking the trend. But it's access to care. It's opportunity. It's a doorway. I'm not saying everyone has to go to this 28-day program, because most 28-day programs stink, by the way. They're awful. They don't 28 days might have been okay for other addiction, but not for opioids. Opioids is a lifetime of treatment and recovery sometimes. So you have to build around that. So we let people design the program. We have a closed-loop system, which means if you're in this part of the state, but you move to that part of the state, you don't stop your services. We kind of give you a warm handoff to that program over there. And then that works so well, we copy that with mental health and kids, right? The same problem is with mental health and kids is access points, right? We forced a lot more access points. So we're doing well. We're still going to lose probably 400 people this year, which is a tragedy. You're never going to be happy until it gets to 0. But there are ways to buck these very, very tragic national trends. And you all know somebody that's dealing with this. If you all know someone that's dealing with opioids, addiction, and mental health. And if you don't, you do. You just don't know you do. But it's in every family. It does not discriminate. It's everywhere now. And so creating those opportunities, those doorways are really, really critical. In system design. Again, Washington can pass a policy or they can give you funding. That's really what they do. But it's up to the states to create these designs. And more states are kind of taking these hub and spoke models that seem to be working.
In a moment, I think that's worth clapping for.
I didn't mean to go on so long, but that's one of the things I'm pretty proud of.
So in a moment, we're going to go to audience Q&A, but we're going to do a quick lightning round. So 30 seconds or less with some quick questions.
I'll do my best.
Are there any important issues, really important issues, that are not on the national radar screen, but as a governor are important, people ought to care about?
Everything is about children's mental health. Okay. Everything. And that seems to be on the radar. They don't quite know what to do about it in Washington. There's too much grandstanding for my liking. If you think we're going to ban TikTok and solve mental health for kids, stop. I mean, I hate TikTok. Don't get me wrong. I can't stand it. The Chinese own it and run it. But believe me, there's already 20 to 30 other apps owned by the Chinese collecting your data. So you better start collecting all of them.
Do you support the legislation in front of Congress?
No, I don't. Because you're scratching the surface. There's all these other ways they're collecting your data. I hate that they're doing it, but they are. So if you think, by the way, who's now going to be the app czar that decides whether an app gets banned or not, right? They think they're doing something, but it just proof positive that they don't understand that.
So maybe we'll get into that more in Q&A.
Yeah.
What do you make of no labels?
You know, I like the no labels guys. Nancy Jacobson, who runs the group, I think she's a wonderful person. I think she had the right idea at the right time. But here's why it's not going to work. And I said this. They did all these focus groups they wanted me to run and all that. But I said people, unfortunately, right now are voting out of fear, not opportunity. Which means that a Democrat is going to say, I'm going to stick with Biden because I'm afraid if I go with that third party, it'll give it to Trump. And the Republicans are going to say, I'm going to stick with Trump because I'm afraid if I vote for that third party, it'll give it to Biden. So they're not voting in terms of the opportunity of their vote, but the fear of what will happen if they don't stick to their team. And it pushes everybody back into their original corners. And Trump in New Hampshire is a great example. As hard as Nikki worked, as great of a candidate as she was, Trump was still holding on to 75% of the Republican vote. If he's holding on to that much of the Republican vote, it's just not going to work. The math doesn't work out. So I appreciate what they're trying to do. Have a Republican and a Democrat on there and all that, and bipartisanship. It's not a bad idea. It's just not going to work this time around. I don't see it. And then you have RFK as an independent, and then no labels, and then what's the one forward? Right? Is that Andrew Yang's group? I mean, you could have like 2 or 3 different independent groups splitting the independent vote, right? It's like the worst thing you could do if you're trying to get a third party on the markers. So I appreciate what they were trying to do, but I just think mathematically it can't happen.
So a loosely related issue is the overall state of our national discourse. There's deep division, distrust. People are questioning whether our republic can actually function. What are just some quick thoughts on how we change the course of discourse?
Okay, I'm very optimistic. I'm super optimistic. If you think democracy is being eroded, if you think this country's going to hell and all that, don't worry. Don't worry. A former president told me, and I'm going to copy his line, and I'm going to use a little earmuffs, guys, a little bit of a bad word. He said, a-holes come and go, but America's institutions stand strong. And I said, well, what do you mean by that, sir? And he said, look, this country came through a civil war. Let's go way back. We went through a civil war, torn apart. But guess what? When it was done, our institutions stood strong. Congress and Senate still met. The presidency was still there. The state still had the rights as a republic. You know, we went through World War I, World War II. We went through the civil rights movement. We saw, a little before my time, but in 1968, right? You had a great American voices literally getting assassinated on television in front of our eyes. JFK and then RFK and then MLK, and people said, it's over, right? It's all ending. We stood strong. We went through a tough time, but we stood strong. We went through 9/11. We went through a pandemic. We've gone through a lot, guys. Bad leaders can come and go, but America's institutions are actually very, very strong, and we should be hopeful about that.
So do we have to do something
to help them? We need to teach it. We need to teach civics. We need to double down. And I met this great gentleman with your education
Dr. Richard Schroeder, there he is.
Great education program coming right out of this library here. Institute talking about civics and history, but not in it's all going to hell guy. No, it's going to be okay. The strength of America is something to be proud of and to teach our kids. And again, you have to teach them how to deal with tough times. The key isn't, if we just need elect better politicians. We all want better politicians. But it's never really happened, right? And I think Milton Friedman, I'm going to steal a line from Milton Friedman, he said, you don't need good politicians. You need the right incentives to incentivize bad politicians to do the right thing, right? And it can be done. If you can incentivize Congress to do the right thing on the debt, it actually can be done. But don't just wait to get the right politician there. It's just not going to work. So create the right incentives to move the ball down the line in the right way. And I don't think we don't think creatively as a system that way right now. We can, but it's going to be okay. It's all going to be good.
Get your questions ready. Last 2 quick questions. You're not even 50 years old. You got lots of runway.
Thanks for keeping reminding him. I think we've gone through. I know I'm almost 50. I get it. My hair's falling out. I'm like,
what's next?
Oh, I'm going to send you all resumes. I have no idea. Really, I mean, I'm not going to run for anything. It's public service, not a public career, right? And I think I could, I've been there 4 terms, and to be blunt about it, I could keep running and winning, and I love the job. I love what I do. But you got to let fresh ideas come. And so there's a responsibility to step out. There's only been one other governor to serve 4 terms and step out. But private sector, I'm a business guy, I'm an engineer. I ran a ski resort for a while. I'm not going back to doing that. That's a really hard business. Anytime your revenue depends on God, as Christian as I am, it was like having the costs of a manufacturer, but the risk of a farmer, right? And I got like 3 ulcers during the whole process. So, you know what I think? And so I'm drinking my Coke, my woke Coke, right? So, I don't mean to pick on them, but I think Coke, I was talking to the CEO, chairman and CEO, James Quincy. We met briefly. We spent a couple days a little bit together. And then I talked to some of these very large companies, as we have all seen, are getting way too political and have stepped in landmines, and then they go, and they try to get themselves out, and they don't know what they're doing. And so I think there's an opportunity. I try to approach everything in a very transparent, even-keeled, bring the temperature down way. I think a lot of these big companies are getting so big, and I would never speak for these folks, but what generally, this is the tone of what I've heard is, gee, Gov, we had no idea that this was even a political problem that we were stepping in. We were just told by our marketing guys that this was a logical thing to do. And you look at Target and Anheuser-Busch and Ford and Disney and Coke. These are big companies. These are great American brands that are getting way too deep in politics, and then they scramble to get themselves out. If anything, they need help not getting in those problems in the first place. And I always thought, I'd be pretty good at that. Is there a job for that? I don't know. Maybe I'll invent myself. I like doing the media stuff, but that's just more fun. That's just to keep my fingers into the politics and what I think is, bring the temperature down and talk about good policy. But I'm a private sector guy. I'm a business guy. And I got 3 kids. I was an environmental engineer. You don't make any money doing that. I ran a ski resort. You don't make any money doing that. I mean, I can tell you. So I got some kids to put through college. My son I'm very proud. My son just became a Marine, and I was very proud of that. He enlisted. Are you cheering because he's a Marine or because I don't have to pay to send him to college? Because they're both great. They're both great benefits. But he just came back from Parris Island. He just enlisted at 19. My daughter, we're looking at schools now, and I got an 11-year-old to put through college. So it'd be great to make a little money, just, to have a little security. And, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, last question for me in 60 seconds or less, because we're going to use this on social media. So the question is, what does Ronald Reagan mean to you? What does his legacy mean to you?
Positivity with results, right? He was all about getting results. He could talk a policy, but in a very positive way, which brought folks on board, which got results. That is his essence. And he was great at communicator. We talk about that a lot. And he got results, but we should focus on results because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? That's all that matters in terms of making our economy strong, making America strong around the world, understanding that you bring world peace with America's strength, not by being isolationist, and knowing how to deal with Democrats. I'm going to do one more. One of the greatest things I'm proud of, and I have a split I have 400 members in my House of Representatives. 400 for 1.4 million people. They get paid $100 a year, right? So they do it out of a passion. And right now my split is 201 Republicans, 199 Democrats. And everyone said, well, you're never going to get anything done. Right? It's gridlock. Look at Washington. You have a tighter match than Washington. Cut to the end. My budget last year, first time in the state's history, passed with a unanimous vote in both houses. Passed unanimously.
Wow.
So I won't go into all the details of how it's done, but it was done. It can be done. Don't let anyone ever tell you that the politics are too difficult to get something done, because Ronald Reagan showed it. He had tough legislatures, he had tough issues, but he always got something done and he always got results. And he did it because he was a great communicator, because he brought that positivity. And people can disagree with you on policy really adamantly, but if you're positive, if you're open, if you tell a joke, if you're asking about their kids, I know it sounds silly. Boy, it brings the temperature right down and you can really just work things out. He was a master at it at a time when America needed it the most. And holy cow, did we get the results from it. And that's, if anything, that's what I try to emulate, when you think of him. He was the full package. And, there'll never be another one like him. And there won't. I hope there is, right? Because we need it now more than ever. I hope there is. But, well, anyway.
Great. Well, we're going to take a few audience questions. Let's see what we have. I see one right over there.
Governor, thank you. Michael J. Herman. You've shared a plethora of great ideas that you have created and programs you've created in New Hampshire. And you also talked about this great community of governors that Vice President Pence created during COVID. Why is it so hard for governors to share and help implement their great ideas in other states?
Yeah.
And is there a way to create a coalition, partnerships with states that are hurting? Like California is hurting a lot and could benefit from a lot of the things that you talked about. Other states can too. Can you articulate?
I think a lot of states do. We really do share a lot of ideas. You know, the key to that opportunity comes from D.C., right? D.C. tries to, every time D.C. passes a law, it is a one-size-fits-all for everybody. But if D.C. would get back to its fundamentals, right? I'm from New Hampshire. We say the founding fathers were wicked smart, as we like to say. They were, because the states have the ideas. And the bigger we let federal government grow, and Republicans have done this as much as Democrats lately, the more we pull away from states. And for example, like when I implement some new ideas on Medicaid, I might talk to other governors about it, but then they have to go to the feds and get a waiver, what they call an 1115 waiver. The feds make it so difficult. If they did things like education, I mean, you want to fix education in this country, get rid of the federal Department of Education, right? Let the money flow to the states and let the states say, oh, we're going to design it out, because then a free market really happens. And New Hampshire says, I have all the opportunity to make my system better than Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, and Connecticut, and New York, which I did. But you would really have a lot of opportunity to do it, not because you just have the money, but you also need the freedom of control of the rules. Because guess what? What's good for California might not be good for New Hampshire, and vice versa. Actually, rarely is. But in that case, I think there'd be a lot better sharing of ideas amongst governors if we actually had more power and more control. But so much of what the Fed does lately is just bigger, more rules. And so we're so limited in our flexibility. But for the most part, states do work. Look, Gavin doesn't want to hear it from anybody. He's not a manager. He doesn't, I don't want to go so far as to say he doesn't care, but he's got one priority, and it's not managing California. It's running for president. That's all he cares about right now, unfortunately. And I lived in San Francisco. I love this state. I love California. And it literally brings me to tears if you're down in LA, what they call Skid Row, right? Awful that they call it that, by the way. I have all these liberals telling me, you should go see Skid Row. Like it's a tourist attraction or something. And I'm like, my God, you have 10,000 people down there. Those people have parents and brothers and sisters and sometimes tragedy. Kids. It's a human tragedy, and you're treating it like it's something to go see. Holy cow. And you can't blame a single Republican for any of what happens in San Francisco or LA. So don't ever tell me the Democrats care more about the homeless. The Democrats care more about mental health. They don't. If they did, they'd get results. They'd listen to red states that I have the lowest poverty rate in the country. It's really hard. It's really hard to have the lowest poverty rate in the country. And we work hard at it. I'm more than happy to share those ideas. But so many of them just don't want to listen. And so it's frustrating because it's not politics. It's just humanity. And it's just people. But they don't even see it as people anymore. It's gotten so bad here. It can be fixed. It can. And I'll have some free time in about 9 months. So maybe I'll come out here. But really, it's a human tragedy that a lot of states, I don't mean to be, I'll be nice. Fourth term, what do I care? Screw it, Gavin. Do a better job. I don't know.
Next question.
Sorry.
Over there, Stephanie, go for it.
Hi, Governor. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. One of the points that you made was your reasoning behind supporting Trump, and because of a Republican administration. But past history shows that Trump is very involved, and he appoints people who are less than qualified. Why would I vote for Trump for a Republican administration? I guess the same is true for a Democratic administration, but I just can't get past the thing that's near and dear to me is his anti-Semitic comments and his attitude. I can't get past that.
So I am not one to sit here and tell you need to be voting for Donald Trump. I mean, I'm not. That's his job. Look, I've tried my best to get rid of that guy. I really did. And I wish other folks had gotten behind Nikki and the whole 9 yards. I mean, they just cowered. They're some of my best friends, and they just cowered and they were chicken to get behind Nikki, even though they all wanted to do it, but they were just scared. So I'm not going to see, that's Trump's job to advocate for that, other than to say you have a binary choice. And in mathematically, I'm kind of a nerd that way. If you're a Republican and you don't vote for the Republican, then you're giving them a vote, right? That's exactly what the Dems want, what the administration wants. I'm an Arab American, and I'm as pro-Israel as you're going to find. I mean, I am so pro-Israel. So the anti-Semitic stuff drives me crazy. The Democrats and the socialists, what they have let happen on these campuses with these kids is awful. It's setting a terrible example. But look, just start with inflation and the border. Those are the two biggest issues for Americans right now. A Republican administration is going to do much better because we're going to open up. Inflation is primarily driven by energy, right? And so let's get our things flowing. You got to transfer to renewables and all that eventually, but that's all going to happen. But get that market, the energy market, going again. The fact that we're going to stop selling natural gas to the Europeans and all that kind of stuff, it's crazy. So opening that stuff up and securing the border, those are the two biggest things on Americans' minds. And there's no doubt a Republican administration will handle that better. That's as far as I'm going to go on that argument. Because, Trump is his own thing, and you're all going to make your own decisions on that. And it's a personal thing, right? A vote's a personal thing. And whatever you decide to do in that voting booth was the right answer for you and your family and your business. Like, I tell people all the time, we were talking about this earlier, when you go to the voting booth, you know what your first priority should be? Be selfish. Vote for what's in your family's interest, your community's interest, your business's interest. That's your job. Right? And that's why you vote, right? Don't do it because the party tells you to. Don't do it because I tell you to. Do whatever you think is in your interest. And if you do that, then you've done the right thing and you let it fall where it may. But I go back to, regardless of who comes out, it ain't going to be great. And regardless of who comes out, we're going to be okay long term. I think we are.
Last two questions. We have one down in the middle.
Yeah, Governor, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you being a scientist and an engineer. And also someone who's worked in the environmental industry. So can you share your thoughts on pollution and energy and the forces at work and how you see things playing out?
Sure. Look, let's do this. Climate change is real, and we all know that. But the answer to climate change is not banning things. It's not stopping things. The answer to the climate change issue and on really all environmental issues is innovation and engineering and new stuff. When you guys had that smog problem in the 60s and 70s in LA, you didn't ban cars. We created a catalytic converter, right? We opened up a market. We created new ideas and used better materials. Now, the answer isn't going, you let the market take care of that, right? What I'm seeing with the electrification of cars and all that, that's actually pure politics. I'm not saying don't buy an electric car. Buy an electric car if you want one. But there's smart ways to do it, and they're driving politics on that more than anything. The hypocrisy I see with the politics around this issue, and I sat with John Podesta. I had dinner with him at the White House, and he's driving a lot of this climate change stuff. And I said, John, with all due respect, you want everyone to buy an electric vehicle, but you won't permit a new power line in this country. You know it takes 15 years minimum to permit a new power line in this country? If I can't get the electrons from here to there, I can't plug in the car. And that's what happened in California last summer, right?
And China's cranking out
and
coal-powered plants left and right.
So we're going to make a transition. But the idea that we should, self-punish ourselves when we actually pump oil cleaner than most anybody we're very smart, and in our innovation, our technology that blossoms here in America better than anywhere else in the world, that's the best, not the only solution. You need regulation, of course. But the best solution to this is smart innovation and letting the free market come to bear and drive those opportunities. Let me give you a quick one on the electric vehicles. It's called the 1-6-90 rule. The amount of materials it takes to make one fully electric vehicle, like all the rare earth metals, which almost all come from China, by the way, and in Africa, in these horrible mine pits, and that's a whole other environmental disaster. But the amount of material it takes just to make one electric vehicle battery can make 6 electric hybrids, or 90 traditional hybrids. And the environmental benefit you get from those 90 traditional hybrids is 7 times that of that one electric vehicle. So it's actually a smarter, more environmentally, more fiscally sound thing to do to go more in a hybrid route right now, as opposed to saying everyone's just got to buy electric vehicles. And what are we learning? There's no secondary market for electric vehicles, right? You make that investment, that's like a one-time investment. You ain't getting your money back, right? They want to make electric buses, and even Democrats that bought all these electric buses are going, don't buy electric buses, they don't work, right? They don't. Like the weight ratios don't work, the technology's not there. So technology, innovation, a free market, and just being smart with your regulations, not punitive. Because you want to cater to the ultra-left. So I'm an environmental engineer, and I'm going to be really braggy and say, I know a lot about this stuff. I spent a career doing it. So there's smart ways to do it. The progressive left, ignoring it is not the answer, and what the progressive left is trying to shove down America's throats is going to bankrupt us. I mean, really, and it's just not going to get the results. So that's it. I mean, I don't know. That's my 2 cents. And look at India. Look at China, what they're doing. Be not, I don't want to say tough on them. You got to be tough on China. India's our friend. India is the real world power here, by the way, guys. India's population is now past China. China's population is going to crash pretty soon because they couldn't have kids, right? And yet half of India's population is under the age of 28. Do you know that? Biggest population in the world, and half of it is under the age of 28. And they're our ally, thank God. Right? That's a partner that we really want.
What should we be doing more of with India?
Partnering, trade, workforce, right? We're not going to grow our own workforce anymore, right? This generation of American kids is just not having kids, or they have them, but they have fewer kids later in life. So you need immigration reform, smart immigration rules to let the process happen. But smart immigration rules primarily with your partners, like India, right? And being able to tap into that. But with that friendship, with that partnership, hopefully comes some leverage to drive better environmental results for what they're putting out in terms of air emissions, smog, chemicals in the water, and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of work to be done, but again, I think we're going to be okay on this one. But climate change isn't going to be solved because of a law that's passed. Oh, if we just pass the right law, we'll solve. No, that's not the way it works. We all have a collective responsibility there, and I'm just a big believer that free markets drive the day.
Governor, thank
Sorry,
you
I talked too much.
so much. We're over time, but join me in thanking Governor Sununu.
That was okay.
This is great.
Okay.
Love it.